Welcome back, focused learners, to another explainer. Okay, let's jump right into this because we've got an absolutely mesmerizing story today. I want you to just imagine for a second the high plateaus and ancient stone churches of Ethiopia. Picture this atmospheric morning mist rolling over these massive ancient obelisks. For over 15 centuries, this specific landscape has resonated with a soundscape literally unlike anything else on Earth. We're talking about a deeply spiritual, incredibly complex system of sacred chant that has echoed completely unbroken through time. But where did it come from? How did the whole shebang actually start? Let's find out.
So, who invented Africa's earliest musical notation? It's a huge historical mystery for a lot of people, but the answer is a man named Kidus Yared, or Saint Yared. He was the 6th century Aksumite theologian, a poet, a hymnologist, and just a true pioneer. He didn't just write a few songs, he literally engineered the musical and spiritual universe of an entire civilization. And honestly, the most fascinating part? His journey did not start out with genius. It started with an incredibly relatable, highly human struggle. Which brings us to Section 1, the underdog of Aksum.
Like pretty much every great hero's journey, Yared's story kicks off with a massive hurdle. Born around 505 AD during the absolute golden era of the Aksumite kingdom, his early life was, well, it was really tough. His father passed away early on, so young Yared was sent off to study Holy Scripture under his uncle Abba Gideon. But Yared was no prodigy. Actually, he failed miserably. He struggled so much just to memorize his lessons, constantly lagging way behind his peers day in and day out. Overwhelmed by frustration and, frankly, the shame of this constant struggle, Yared just couldn't take it anymore, so he fled into the wilderness. I mean, how many of us have felt that exact same way, right? When the material just isn't clicking, when everyone else seems to get it but you are totally lost. Yared ran away from his studies, totally exhausted, feeling like a complete failure. He found a tree, sat down in its shade, and just rested, probably thinking his academic career was totally over.
But as Yared sat under that tree, he noticed a tiny caterpillar. It was trying to climb up a super smooth branch to reach a piece of fruit, and it slipped. Then it fell to the ground. It tried again and fell again. Slip, drop, fall, slip. 6 distinct times this tiny creature failed. But then, on the 7th attempt, through pure, unadulterated perseverance, that little caterpillar finally reached the fruit.
Failure is not the end, but a precursor to mastery. Yared had a massive epiphany watching that tiny insect. He thought, hey, if a caterpillar can endure 6 brutal failures to reach its goal, why couldn't I? This profound realization completely transformed him. He marched right back to his uncle, begged for forgiveness, and threw himself back into his studies with an unyielding, fierce dedication.
Now we get to the real turning point in Section 2, divine inspiration and musical innovation.
So Yared's newfound dedication didn't just get him better grades. It unlocked something completely transcendent. According to church tradition, his relentless study was eventually met with divine illumination. The story goes that he was carried in spirit to the heavenly realms, where he actually heard angelic choirs singing before the throne of God. And he returned to earth with a massive mission: to organize human worship so it actually matched the harmony of the heavens. To pull this off, he created something entirely brand new called Zima. Before Yared, liturgical worship in Aksum was really quiet. It was just spoken, recited, in these unstructured tones. It was kind of flat. Yared completely transformed this by inventing Zima. He turned the quiet murmurs of the church into a dynamic, highly organized liturgical harmony, one that perfectly blended beautiful poetry with complex scales and eventually physical movement. He basically gave the church its heartbeat.
To make this work, Yared organized his music into 3 distinct modes, and these remain the absolute backbone of Ethiopian liturgical music even today. Let's break these down. First up, you have Giz. This is your direct, foundational plain chant, and it's used for standard, everyday services. Then there's Ezel. This one is solemn, it's deep, it's highly dignified, and it's specifically reserved for periods of fasting and memorial rites. And finally, Arai. This is a much lighter, complex, incredibly joyous mode filled with vocal ornamentation, and you use this when it's time to celebrate high festivals. So he essentially took the entire human emotional experience of worship and categorized it into these 3 musical buckets. But here's a question. How do you preserve all these complex, beautiful melodies for the future? Well, you have to write them down, right? So Yared invented Melekit, a highly sophisticated musical notation system.
He used Gi's character abbreviations and specific symbols written right above the text to indicate exactly how the chant should rise, fall, and sustain. And guys, here is the truly mind-blowing historical surprise. Yared developed this written notation system centuries before similar musical notation systems were standardized over in Europe. I mean, he was light years ahead of his time. All right, moving right along to Section 3, Sacred Instruments and Liturgy.
You see, Yared didn't just want you to sing the music. He wanted you to feel it, right in your bones. He realized that true worship should engage all the senses, so he introduced physical rhythm and embodied movement directly into the church services. He integrated 3 primary sacred instruments. First, the makamia, or prayer stick. Clergy used this for physical support during hours-long vigils, sure, but they also used it to mark the tempo with synchronized, sharp strikes against the stone floor. Crack, crack. Then you have the tenzinatsel, the sistrum. Picture the sound of a brass rattle, adding these shimmering, metallic, high-frequency accents to the chant. And underneath it all, the kebaro, a large drum providing this deep, booming, driving pulse to the sacred celebrations. The striking stick, the rattling brass, the booming drum. Together with rhythmic swaying, Yared created this fully immersive physical worship experience. Alongside all his musical genius, Yared was an incredibly prolific author. His absolute masterpiece, the Mazgaba de Gwa, translates to the Treasury of Hymns. But listen, this isn't just a songbook. It is the oldest major literary work in the entire Gaze language. In this massive treasury, Yared meticulously organized his hymns to perfectly align with the church calendar, the shifting seasons, times of rain and harvest, and the specific feast days of the saints. He essentially mapped the music of heaven right onto the earthly calendar of his people. Now, to really understand just how powerful his performances were, you have to hear this fantastic anecdote. Legend has it that Emperor Gebri Meskel of Aksum was listening to Yared sing one day. The emperor was so completely captivated, so deeply in a trance from the mesmerizing beauty of the Zima, that he accidentally dropped his heavy spear right onto Yared's foot. And the most incredible part of this? Neither the king nor Yared even noticed the injury until the song was completely over. I mean, no way, right? That is the sheer hypnotic power of Yared's music. Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, an enduring musical legacy. From his birth in 505 AD as a struggling, frustrated student to becoming an absolute master whose voice could literally hypnotize emperors, Yared's life was just extraordinary. But as he grew older, he didn't stick around the royal courts. In his later years, he sought out quiet. He retired as a hermit to the breathtaking Simeon Mountains, where he taught his disciples and spent his final days in prayer until his passing in 571 AD. And remarkably, 1,500 years later, his work hasn't just barely survived, it has lived, totally uncorrupted for a millennium and a half. The crucial takeaway here is his dual legacy. On one side, right within the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, the Mallet system he created continues to preserve ancient Christian worship perfectly intact. But on the flip side, his influence spills way, way outside the church walls. When you look at secular traditional Ethiopian music, the music of the countryside, the folk songs, scholars agree that its modal sensibilities, its vocal ornamentations, its rhythms, they're rooted entirely in Yared's framework. So he's not just a saintly scholar, he is for sure the undisputed foundational father of Ethiopia's entire national musical identity. I want to leave you with this final thought. How much of our modern world's beauty was built by the perseverance of ancient pioneers? Kidus Yared watched a caterpillar fail 6 times before succeeding, and because he took that lesson to heart, he transformed earthly noise into heavenly art that still resonates 1,500 years later. Every single time a drum beats or a sistrum chimes in Ethiopia today, his spirit lives on. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, stay focused, and I'll catch you next time.